I was kind of an oddball woman among a lot of men. So I go to Vegas with about 15 men. They were very good at picking where to go and when to add their own sales meetings so they could stay longer. So we go to a conference, we have some meetings, and then they go golfing one day. I didn't go golfing, but they had a big double suite rented at the Rio prior to that dinner. So they're drinking prolifically before the dinner. They're talking about their golfing day and they're handing out coupons or whatever to the pro shop. And they're like, well, you got closest to the pen on number 2. Here's $60. You did this, you did that. So they all had something for the pro shop to buy. And then somebody realized the little woman didn't have anything. So he ran out of the room and went to his room. He came back and he handed me a beach towel. And I opened it up. And here was a naked woman embroidered on this towel they got from a strip club. That was my gift. They got their things to the pro shop and they gave me this towel. I got pretty good at quips. So he handed me the towel and I threw it on the floor in the middle of all of them. And I said, I'm throwing in the towel.
Welcome to another great episode of Dre and Smiley, The Inner Circle.
Dre, this is a very special moment for me. My heart is on my sleeves. My emotions are running high. This guest that we have sitting beside me, this beautiful angel to my right, her name is Susan Stansbury. I used to call her Mrs. Stansbury. Quick story is when I was in the ABC, a boarding school in Appleton, Wisconsin, she was one of my host moms. So I spent 3 years living with Susan and it was amazing. And I'm just blushing, turning red on the inside. You can't. So honored to have Susan in my home and B, to have her on our podcast. So Susan is an amazing woman. Her heart is endless. She just reaches out and helps people. I met her, she said 10 years ago, but it's been when I was a young person. A few decades, but back then she was very instrumental in I would say in my success. But she's had her own success. Susan was a trailblazer in the corporate world. She was one of the few female executives working at paper mills, paper companies. So she understands paper, how it's produced, how it's used, 3M, all these. She was a supplier working for Canadian companies in Appleton, Wisconsin. And a lot of times she was the only lady there. This is during the era where there weren't many female executives in sales and or executives or anywhere. But what she's done, and I'm so happy to have her here to talk about it, she's written a book. Her book is called 14 Dinners and a Lunch. So with that introduction, Susan, please welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Kevin and Dre. This is great to be with you.
All right.
So please tell us about your book. First, tell us the beginning. What made you decide to take in someone like me into your home for 3 years during the ABC program? How were you approached? How did you start that?
Kevin.
Wait. I want to know how hard-headed was Kevin. I want to know all the dirt. Or did you have any regrets when you took a man where you're like, what have I got myself into?
Say, oh, he was just cute. That was the only reason. But no, he had just been the most wonderful person ever since the day I met him. And, well, I mean, you would wear like a bow tie at times and things like that. What endeared me too is like he would thrift shop like an expert, which I do at times. So but he'd look like $1 million. And do you remember the case? His daughter, he would take her to thrift stores and he would call it the mall, a giant thrift store. And then he'd give her an allowance and she could buy things there. And one time, then she went to Mommy's Mall, the real mall. And then she said, she saw the prices and she said, I need to go back to Daddy's Mall.
Where I can afford things.
Nice also to be able to get things that you don't need to spend a fortune on.
Yeah.
In Florida, if I want to pick up an extra pair of shorts at a Salvation Army place, that looks great and it costs $2 instead of $25, why not?
Let me ask you a question about ABC real quick. So, and a quick note is that Smiley hasn't changed. I'm sure you know this. He's very wise with his money. I don't know that he's ever been into a Louis Vuitton store, but 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 he will wear some Louis Vuitton as long as he can find it in a thrift store. So, but it's a good thing. Obviously, it's a good thing. You want to stretch your money. But here's the question: though. The ABC program. What is that program, and how did you
Get
get
involved with
involved with
it.
it in such a way where you could then connect with Smiley?
Well, it's called A Better Chance. And they would take students from around the country, often cities where the schooling was not that great. And to get into the program, they had to have a certain grade point already, but they figured when they got to these better schools, it might be a new thing of the difficult. So he got in it that way. He was chosen by your local people. And he was always a good student. But I think you felt you learned a lot in Appleton, Wisconsin. And Appleton was noted as one of the best places in the United States for that program. Now, some students went through that program to private schools and other things, but the public schools were so good there and often in Wisconsin that it was ranked to be a good place to go. So I think that's how the program sent him to Appleton, right? Right.
That is 100% correct. I didn't know I was getting shipped because I had good grades, but then when I landed in Wisconsin, it was such a great experience. And the host family experience is indescribable. It's had such a profound impact on my understanding of life, families, cultures, everything. So I love Susan. I just love her. She's one of my moms. So she's my mom. So I've had the Lord bless me with several moms, and she's one of them. So
Well,
thank
we
you.
did meet
That's all right.
places across the country through the years. Like, I think one time you said if I'm ever in Philadelphia area or Pittsburgh area, and I said, well, the closest I'm going to be is going to be Atlantic City because I had a people I had to see there for an account. And he's like, I'll meet you there. So like we went to Caesars and had dinner and things like that through the years to connect in various cities. So that was super keeping track.
Yeah. What did you
Uh,
get out of the program, Susan? I know
uh,
I know Smiley and I have talked about it, and he's gotten a lot of different nuggets. He's got an additional mom, a great education. What did you get out of the program?
Well, the people that asked us to join, we were friends with them. And then I have the one son, but I have like another family member now that I've gained, so wonderful.
so let's talk about the reason why you started the book. What was the catalyst of the book, and how long you've been working on it to publish it?
Well, I don't know, from a young age, I said I wanted to be a writer. And actually, some of my jobs and things came because I was naive. I thought, yeah, I could do this, but I didn't know you weren't supposed to be able to do that. So out of college, I was an English major, but then I dropped out of teaching and later got business degrees. But um, I wanted to go to Chicago to be a writer. Like, what possessed me to think I could do that? And I went there and I knew a family. I stayed there a couple months that summer. And then I thought I have to move out. And I went to the YWCA, which was like little cells. And I kept interviewing, and they thought, well, maybe she could be a proofreader. In one case, they had a job where it would be like writing a catalog. You could write 5 words about this product. But I was very fortunate to find this job with Field Enterprises, the owners of Marshall Field's, the Sun-Times Daily News, and World Book Encyclopedia. So I ended up at the marvelous Merchandise Mart, one of the biggest buildings in the world by volume, and for the World Book Group. But I was in a little internal department of 3 of us women writers and a couple of assistants. And I had a rare woman editor there. And Well, first of all, like even my parents, my wonderful mom, anything I did coming from way north, little town, she was always behind me. She never questioned. And this editor taught me so much more than college. She taught me how to write to length, how to, well, I always wrote short, even in college. It was a paper and they said 8 to 12 pages. I'd be 8 1/4 pages. And so if I had to do on this little 4-column newspaper we did in a little magazine, they would say, you write 104 lines of 35 characters per line. And I learned how to do exactly that. And I still can do that for magazines. I write for a couple industry magazines. So I learned how to do it plus or minus like 5 words, and the techniques to either extend it by interviewing or looking at history or whatever. And really good editing we did. And we competed on our editing, we 3 women, and even our grammar. So it was a wonderful job to begin with. And so that was being able to write. And like this book, 14 Dinners and a Lunch, that I wrote, I have had about 5 books I've had in mind for many years. I've been able to write through my various jobs, but more in a techie or business way. But I kept thinking of various subjects for so many years. And like one of them, I think I may write, so don't take the title. One of them I'm calling A View from the Trenches of Middle Management, because all these business writers are at the top. They're the CEO, they're the whatever Welches of GM or whoever they are. And you don't get that view of so many of us that were in that sea of middle management. And so my plan is to interview about 10, 12 people that have been in middle management in various ways. Everything from a union labor leader to other people who, went up the ladder. But the people in middle management take flack from above them and from below them. Yeah, like that. No. But they take it from above and from the people who report to them. So they're in the middle and they get it from both ends. So that's one of the ones. Now, this book that I have recently come out as an Amazon ebook, 14 Dinners and a Lunch. I don't know. I thought it was a fun title. It's probably not the most understandable unless I explain, but the subtitle is It's Not About the Food, the 14 Dinners and a Lunch. And the 14 Dinners and a Lunch take place over decades. So I use the dinners or the lunch as the excuse to tell a story. Like one of my chapters is called Viva Las Vegas. And remember, I was kind of an oddball woman among a lot of men. So I go to Vegas with about 15 men. They were very good at picking where to go and when to add their own sales meetings so they could stay longer and golf. So we go to a conference, we have some meetings, and then they go golfing one day. And I didn't go golfing, but they had a big double suite rented at the Rio prior to that dinner. And they drank so much that they brought in dollies of booze. They wouldn't buy the hotel booze, so they could go to a liquor store and buy, a lot of booze. So they're drinking prolifically before the dinner. They're talking about their golfing day, and they're handing out, I don't know what the word, coupons or whatever to the pro shop. And they're like, well, you got closest to the pen on number 2. Here's $60. You did this, you did that. So they all had something for the pro shop to buy. And then somebody realized the little woman didn't have anything. So he ran out of the room and went to his room, and he came back. I tell the whole story. He came back and he handed me a towel the size of like a beach towel. And I held it up and I opened it up, and here was a naked woman embroidered on this towel that they got from a strip club. And so by this time I was better.
They gave it to you.
Yeah, that was my gift. They got their things to the pro shop and they gave me this towel. And by then I was getting better at my quips because I usually publicly tried to deal with things not with anger or anything like that. I got pretty good at quips. So he handed me the towel and I threw it on the floor in the middle of all of them. And I said, I'm throwing in the towel. And
That's
they
clever.
thought it was hilarious. And they were all like, okay, she'll be okay. So, but for a
She's one of the
yeah,
boys.
right. I mean, that's the thing about surviving. If you're in that situation, you have to understand. I think sometimes I was stoic or, I ignored it. And in meetings, I got pretty good too. Like I would be in a meeting with several men. And I remember one time a guy said, he was talking about a major company. He said, we're going to get our tit in the ringer over that account. And then
Mm,
some of the men turned to look at me, and then he
yeah.
says, oh, sorry, Susan. And I said, that's okay. I substituted a part of the male anatomy.
So you had to be quick. You had to,
Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of a survival mechanism. Let me ask you a question. The title, 14 Dinners and Lunch. What's the significance of the title?
Well, that's one of the 14 dinners, Viva Las Vegas. That happened, and we went to the dinner, and I briefly described the dinner. So,
And so there were 13 other dinners, and there was a
different
lunch
years,
that you
different
documented.
places, yes. Yes.
You know, it's interesting. I'll let Smiley share this with you if he wants to, but he's actually in the process of writing a book, similarly to the perspective of middle management.
Yes.
However, his is from the top, from the top down, and the characteristics of those at the top. And I don't know if he wants to share. I'll let him share if he wants to. But that's interesting that you guys have that commonality there, where you both have a interest in writing a book from those unique perspectives.
I was on our quality process team one time. First, they assigned me to write, to communicate. And I started a publication called Quality Today. And then eventually they had me chair it. But I would do things for the top management. Like one time I did a survey of the top, let's say 10 management and then 10 employees to ask each of them, how much do you think everybody knows about this policy or situation? And the
Mm,
employees would say they didn't know enough. The top management would say, oh, everybody knows. And so I
hmm
used it to tell management, no, they do not know. And you need to be a better communicator. So
hmm
I think you do find that with top management. They're in their bubble very often. You know,
For sure.
or
For sure. I think one of the challenges they have is that their perspective is one where they have one data source
yeah.
and they depend heavily on all their decisions based on that one data source without considering there's other mediums, other channels they should tap into so they can take a holistic approach to resolving whatever the problem is.
I wrote a series of articles in one of the Wisconsin papers. I rotated with three men who were more uh, technical, lab people kind of things. And mine was more of a market perspective. But I did an article about the president of this company, and he's the only person I've ever seen. He sat in with us in teams, like when we had this quality process. So he was exemplary in that. I mean, one team I was on, we had a maintenance guy, we had me, an engineer, and the president. One reason he did it is because a customer of a sanitary product found a bug in a couple times in our product, and we could not have that. It was a multi-million-dollar customer. So we were on the team to solve that. And it's really pretty funny of some of the things that happened because we were near a river and they had local name was River Millers would rise out of the river in May every year. Caddisfly. We hired an entomologist. We had all these people helping us, and they put traps in the river to give us 5 days notice. I mean, we did a lot of things to the factory. We double doored. We changed the what do you call it? The indoor outdoor air. What is that? I forgot.
monitoring of the environmental.
Well, it's like if your company's sucking air in or out, I forgot.
And
Yeah. Anyway, we changed that airflow so it would not come in. And then at that time, like the trucks, if they were backed up, we would do special things. We would do all these lockdown things when they were emerging. And it was sort of funny later because they gave us, I don't know, managers, I guess, a class one time about uh, how you see yourself in your job. And this guy had us write our own obituary. And you could name what year you died and where you retired and everything. So we all did it. And afterwards he says, well, did anybody write a word about what they're doing right now? And nobody did except me. I raised my hand and he says, well, what did you say? And I said, well, I was a member of the famous caddisfly team.
The famous.
Yeah, what was my joke about being on the bug team. But so
that
Interesting.
I like that story. So you never told me that they had you write an obituary
yeah.
as part of the management training. But when you were in corporate America, what would you say to some young ladies now that are aspiring to be in upper management roles or middle management roles? I'm assuming, and I don't want to assume, but I'm going to deduce that maybe things have changed a little bit. Or do you think it's still the same old boys network? They have the one lady in the room, and women need to be witty because of all these different things that's going on. But what would you say to someone now that's listening and they're trying to climb that corporate ladder?
Well, being naive actually worked for me because sometimes I thought, well, I can do that, and they weren't ready for it. But once you put yourself out there, I think they have to take you seriously. Um, so that worked for me at times. They had me see an industrial psychologist 3 times in my career, the same guy who worked for a lot of these companies. And the first time I did it, he asked me all these questions and he gave me something that was a piece of paper and it was called Vocational Test for Women. And there were 2 columns and you had to pick one from A or one from B and then go down the row. So it would be like, I'd rather be a nurse or a flight attendant, never the doctor or the pilot. And I was applying for a management or, really first step into management. So then the next time I saw him, I thought he's learned more than I have because he changed his manner toward me. But I know I've told a couple women that I worked with, one wanted a better job for so many years. And I said, oh, seriously, I'll call Sandy. I said, Sandy, give yourself some portion of time. And if they don't start to see you in that role, often people get ahead by leaving. And I actually told that to a young man who worked for me also. I said, set your goals. And if you don't get there, leave. And that actually worked for me a couple times too. I jumped ahead by leaving. Often industry recruiters would call me. But one time I went back and I applied for another job in a company I had worked for at another level. And I'll never forget what he said to me. He says, oh, I remember you back, then. And gee, you've come such a long way. But I could tell at the moment he still saw me in that other role. He could not imagine me in this new role. So I know several people who have gotten ahead that way. Um, but I think you just have to go for it. I mean, sometimes I didn't realize I was kind of a lone ranger. I just thought I could do that. And sometimes there was pushback. One job that I had at a paper/medical products, like they made gowns and drapes for hospitals. A lot of it was products made from these materials. And when I got this job, this guy said to me, he said, so they needed a woman here, huh? And
Hmm.
I said, well, is that why they interviewed 7 men and me? But, I did. I would often be nervous in life, whether it was an interview or some talk I had given, I'd beat myself up. But publicly, I handled myself fine. And so I could, do those kinds of comebacks and things to answer things. And when I would interview, another thing that worked for me really well is I knew I was going to see at least 3 people for one job. One was going to be a plant manager, and one was going to be the head of the tech people, and then one was going to be the head of marketing. So when I saw the tech guy, I made sure to mention this coating called FC807. And then the manufacturing guy, I made sure to mention the kinds of equipment that, I was familiar with. And then the marketing person, I would talk about, milestones in industry or something like that. So I geared my interviews to the individuals. So anybody can try to do that to get ahead. You're not just pigeonholed. Well, one time when I joined this company, this guy thought I was the delivery mail girl. He thought I was the
Hmm.
girl that delivered the mail around the building. And he said, "Are you the new mail girl?" And behind his back later, I often called him the quality boy.
Touche.
But I just think you have to go for it. And sometimes they have to respond to you. I mean, if you're qualified, or you think you have credentials to bring to the picture, you can get ahead. Now, if things change, Kevin, sometimes a lot, many. In fact, I wrote an article about women in industry, and I didn't do that when I was younger, but in recent years, I thought I should. And so I went back to some of the earlier eras where women were like me. They came out of advertising, PR, and marketing. They were buyers. They were in the HR department. Then I said, now they're more often women with tech degrees, a chemistry, master's degree. And so I profiled some of those women across section of how it's changed. So there are more opportunities, and it's a wider world for women than it was.
One thing I wanted to, if you could elaborate on is, I know that you left corporate America and you started your own consulting firm. So how has that been transitioning from structured corporate America to entrepreneurial, just doing it yourself?
Yeah.
What challenges have you faced, or what some of the impacts of running your own business?
Well, I was fortunate. I had a couple people tell me I should go on my own. Even one of the guys that recruited me to a couple jobs through the years. And I was actually worried about health insurance too, being on my own. I'll just mention that in Wisconsin, I actually had no health insurance for 1 year because somebody didn't like a lab result. I'd had a liver biopsy, and I'm pretty much a non-drinker, but they would, Um, so I went 1 year with no insurance. Then I found a very expensive state insurance. They have one for families, but this was one for, they called it high risk. So I paid near $1,000 a month, and here I've gone on my own. And then I found a small group, Chamber of Commerce of people with, let's say, 2 employees. And I did have a guy who worked for me, so I got us both insurance. Um, so I had that challenge. I was fortunate. I actually hired a really good ad agency in the corporate world. And even though they were out of Green Bay, they did work for Harley. They were in some national magazines for awards that they won. And so I went to work for them for a couple years to sharpen my skills, uh, to round out. I mean, I had done some PR and advertising way back. So that helped me go on my own. But I think when I was working for those ad people, I was in a factory doing a promotion of this huge piece of equipment. And the president of that company, I met him while I was there. And he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a marketer and I'm helping with this promotion of your equipment," and which did end up on the cover of an industry magazine. And
Wow.
he says, "I've never met a marketer that makes any sense to me."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, you haven't met the right one." And he hired me, and I did work for him for a few years. And I was so fortunate, like the first year or two, he had a guy that did that, but I kind of did most of this guy's work for him. I wrote his marketing letters and I gave him ideas and I did calendars of promotion and a few customers that would do their annual budget. And I would say, here's a quarterly plan. Like, I'm going to try to get you 2 magazine covers per year. Maybe you're going to go to these trade shows. As a matter of fact, in interviewing, uh, I did some work where I could study anything. Like one time was centrifugal pumps. I had no idea to begin with, but I studied it and I interviewed all these people and who are your competitors? What trade shows do you go to? What magazines do you read? And then they had these markets, like one of them was agricultural, I guess. And we studied high-rise buildings and golf course uh, watering, centrifugal or whatever it was. So we studied these other markets. And then we went back and we said, what magazines do they read? Who are their competitors? And, so we picked their weakest competitor to tell them to get into that market first. Then we wrote them a 3-year plan and we told them what trade shows to go to now, and then they would have us write the next plan and study that kind of thing. So
Some of this, Susan, quick question about marketing, since you're on that subject in detail. Difference between sales and marketing. So in my simple mind, marketing, this is where you have to put your professor hat on and encourage me and don't beat me over the head, say, no, dummy. And that's what my marketing is, creating awareness of this mouse. This mouse is, has all these features and things like that. And then sales is, here's why this mouse is right for you. Is that fair to say in terms of the difference between the two?
Well, yes, the salespeople do drill in, I think, much more closely, and marketing tries to focus them on certain products and markets that are more profitable. And all my jobs in these industries, especially paper, they have a commodity end of their business, which is like, we're just filling up trucks and it's this many tons. My job as a marketer is to try to get them to sell the ones that are going to be more profitable. So sometimes they would ignore the marketer because if they could sell out that factory on the commodity, they didn't care about the specialties. And it was a battle my entire career. And I was often in the specialties, which was much more fun than the commodities. So like in one company, I'm working on transdermal medicine and, bandages for J&J, the peel off strips with silicone on the back, and they're just selling truckloads. And depending on how you are rewarded, like, are you rewarded for your tons sold or that you're very profitable? And often, like one job, there were 6 of us specialties and 35 of commodity. And they decided to put us together. And we specialties people all pretty much left within 6 months because we were getting monthly bonuses based on profitability. But our tons were like a third or a half of theirs. So now, if we're all compensated on tons, our monthly bonuses are just cut to nothing. So, and it wasn't as interesting to us. And they tried to blend us. It was sort of interesting because we said, they're not going to sell these specialties. And sure enough, after many of us left, they reconstituted that group of 2-3 years later. So there is a big difference. And having been on both sides, I love marketing because it has such a wide umbrella. Everything for advertising, PR, branding, positioning, forecasting, profitability. It has a huge range of what you can do. And depending on the job, you might be more focused on this end or that. When I dealt with clients, I would sometimes hand out a page with like 30 things you could do. And I'd say, now we're going to focus on just a handful this year or whatever. And they would start with that advertising, PR, marketing, advertising. and then certain kinds of marketing, like direct marketing to right to these certain customers or whatever. So it is such a wide ranging thing, but that's
Yeah.
interesting to me.
So here's another question. So 2025, right? Digital marketing.
Yes,
How has that completely flipped the script compared to how marketing was done
yes,
when you were, kind of in the thick of it?
yes. Well, it has changed so much, and you have to be competent, in the digital era. For example, I went into, for some of my clients, when you Google things, and I would guarantee them they'd be on the first page. And then on the right hand side, there'd be that little list of things you can click on. So I would get them on there also. And I could work on their budget. Like if well, we can't afford if we get too many clicks, we're paying for all of this. And I'd say, well, I'll have a cutoff, a daily cutoff when you get to that. So I can tell you exactly how much money we'll spend. But I would get them on there. Now, the digital email and all of that, like your lists for email, but I still think of marketing and communication as a giant funnel. Like at the widest end of the funnel, is the widest audience. Like if you're selling Coca-Cola and you want to tell the world, then you're on television with your ads. If you're in industry, you don't need to buy a national TV ad very often, maybe a 3M bite or whatever, but generally you're targeting your audience. So you have all kinds of e-lists and e-newsletters and you still, but when I say it's a funnel, as you get that funnel down to your top customers, it's one-on-one to me still. Always. You need to see those people. You can't just make your sales based on your emails. I mean, some cases, some kinds of products, but I know Kevin and I both, it's like, we need to be in front of their face um, and, convince them that way.
Right. And so in terms of the data that you capture to ensure the juice is worth the squeeze, talk to me about what data you're using today to ensure that you're not expending too many resources at the opening of the funnel
Yes.
and most of your resources at the end of that funnel.
Yes. Well, that's a very good question, and I certainly could do much more. But even when you have a website, you can have the data to see where people land. Well, let's say they start with your home page, but where they move to, what pages they spend the most time on, and that will tell you a lot about what you should be doing, emphasizing, for example. So there are a lot of things you can do. I know Kevin and I both been to a lot of industry trade shows. I still use, I have a planner of pre-show and at show and then follow up. And all this follow up, you choose whatever kind of media you want. Again, often in industry, they maybe need to touch and feel things. So that's probably why there's a lot of those trade shows. I mean, one of the industries I'm very involved with, average person doesn't know at all, is called non-wovens. And I dealt with at least 10 companies who make wet wipes. And that's all that stretchy little wipes, especially the wet ones. So that's a unique product. People need to see it. It can be designed so much better than paper, my original paper industry. You can engineer the thickness, the stretch, the strength, and you can layer it or blend layers. So you can put all kinds of synthetic fiber in there. You can put polyethylene, polypropylene, polyester, and you put polyester in there if it will end up in the microwave because it takes heat. That takes a lot of sort of in person. Maybe I should tell about my visit to the drug company.
Please do. Yeah,
What I'm going to talk about?
yeah, I do. Tell them.
Yeah, I was mentioning transdermal, and it was kind of new. And I figured these companies knew shots, they knew pills. And I was not real brilliant about it. I had a partner who left, and then I ended up making calls by myself. But I flew out to New Jersey one year to a company there, pharmaceutical. And a lot of the sales that you and I do are consulting. They're not talking to the buyers. you're talking to people who are developing the products. So I meet this guy in his lab. He's got his white lab coat. And he says, well, okay, before we start, let's just talk a little bit about the industry. And I said, okay. And he says, well, you know what the NDAs are, don't you? And I said, well, yes, the new drug applications. And he says the ANDAs. And I said, yes, the amended new drug applications. And he asked me about 4 or 5 questions. And then I could tell he's like, okay, I can probably talk to her. And now we're talking about these patches, which he didn't know what the layers were, what the adhesive or anything. And I had something to bring to the picture. But the meeting ended up, I went out to my rental car and I sat there for a moment and I thought he would fall off his chair if he knew that every answer I gave him to his little questions were from a cheap novel I was reading on the airplane on the way to the appointment. The novel was called Strong Medicine, and it was about a drug rep who had problems with the amended or the drug applications.
Look at that.
I mean, if you're around long enough, you have a lot of crazy things that have happened to you through the years. I should have gone back, but that was one of my funnier visits.
I love that
I love it.
so much because in our profession, you always get someone on the other side that's trying to stump the chump,
Yeah,
trying to
Yeah.
yeah,
this stump the sales guy or make
Yeah.
it seem like you don't know anything.
yeah,
And I just love when Susan told me that story years back about how the novel, it was like serendipitous that she read
Yeah.
something and this guy didn't know it. And she just was able to meet him question for question.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to
I
switch
love
gears
it.
on you a little bit because you are a prolific writer and you've been in marketing and you talked about how you were doing the editing things. From a professional perspective, as you are, what's your take on AI and how does AI impact on writing and marketing, or how do you see this new tool that everyone on LinkedIn is talking AI, AI,
Yeah,
AI?
yeah.
So from your perspective, being like, even like you said, you went through, you and the other ladies were competing for the best editor. Well, are editors needed now that you got AI and that they're doing the spelling, or what's your take on that?
Well, I actually wrote on something that I said it will turn us all into editors, but I personally don't want to have anything to do with it. I don't want someone else to write for me. I think it could be very convenient if you need to dash something off. I remember telling one boss, I think during that quality process, I had to do something, and then I don't know, there was a question, and I said, well, I did the very best I could in the time I had. So I delivered adequate, material, which you can do with AI. You can get that little work done if you just want to dash off some communication. And you can edit it. But if you want to be a writer or even be special on your job, if you think if that's needed, then to me, I ignore it. I do, I still lean on a lot of the old things, the synonyms and everything. I can't keep saying the word success over, so I try to do that. My original, that editor, she taught me a little about rhythm too. And you can find out you're okay. Like on that job, the company president asked the 3 of us to submit a Christmas message. And I wanted 2 out of 3 years because I thought, what would he want? And I went Merry Christmas with business. And I ghost wrote for several people, like on the one that was on the magazine cover. It was how to maximize your 10 color printing press. And, I could interview him, but write in his voice. So it was kind of,
That's a skill.
yes, to listen to them and how they say things. So that's been fun to do that a number of times. And, I would have one person call me up from a healthcare company and she'd say, I need this such and such to go out to the guys tomorrow. Would you do this, that, and the other thing? And I could write it and it would typically be good. And like some of those magazines, non-women's industry, they don't change 2 words hardly. And I mean, sometimes I always ask them how many words. So I turn it in to the length they want. And then I also give them photos to go with it, and they use those photos very often. So it's kind of nice that way.
Do you think with AI, just
Oh,
to follow up with what Smiley asked, do you think AI is going to create, well, one, a dependence, thus decreasing the quality of our writers, much like the calculator, right? So before the calculator, people were just kind of you had no choice but to be on top of it with your quick math and math facts, things like that. Calculator comes along, people are like, why worry about it? Grab the calculator. So with AI, you mentioned that you could hear someone's voice and write in that voice. I imagine you could probably, if you know someone well enough, read what's been written and say, "Oh yeah, Smiley wrote that," or "Dre wrote that." But with AI, you know, you kind of lose that authentic, level of writing. So, do you think we're gonna see fewer people like yourself who are just really skilled writers because people will start becoming dependent on AI?
Some of each, I think the skilled writers who want to write, whether it's their voice or for a client, will keep at that, but it will become a crutch for many people. It's kind of like when I was in college originally, like I had a class with 10 novels and I didn't feel like reading them. I was lazy. Back
Cliff Notes.
Yes, but what I would do is I would get that whole gist of the chapters, then I would read 3 or 4 chapters in great detail. So I could jam the detail in there that the teachers knew that wasn't in the Cliff's notes. But I mean, I was not a math. You talk about things that help you with the calculator. Common sense is so important. I used to do a huge spreadsheet because I was in this little unit, and we would put in all the numbers down one way and across the other every month. And, there'd be the 12 months. And I wasn't a big math person, but I know a couple of times my common sense really worked for me. They had a guy take over that spreadsheet, and a month or two in, I looked at what was done by the spreadsheet, and I looked at it and I thought, I think this is $1 million off. And the reason I thought that was because he showed, I don't know, it was 1 million less revenue or what, some important number. I think it was like revenue than the month before. And I thought, well, we didn't sell any less or any more than it was pretty much on the money. We didn't sell seconds in quality. We didn't reduce the prices. So I thought this does not make sense. So that was common sense. So sure enough, it was roughly 1 million off. And I mean, a lot of my jobs, I really didn't know what things were about. For example, a company that would want a truckload of something, of giant rolls. Finally, you find out, let's say it had 2 giant rolls, and the top, I don't know, you probably know more now than I, but let's say it's 60 feet tall inside, and it's 40-foot or 53-foot truck. Well, if they would add 5 inches to the diameter of the roll, they would get X amount more in the truck, save that much in shipping. So I would have somebody draw out the truck for me with the rolls, kind of take away the side of the truck and, figure out, well, these products are thicker, they're going to be taking up more room or whatever. So common sense. And I had one for like films too, how much polyester or polyethylene or whatever would be used. And if they made it thicker, you'd have less feet, but you'd have more weight or something. So, I mean, years later, this factory guy, I gave him my cheat sheet list to try to understand it all. And I saw him like 15 years later, and he says, I still have your list.
Wow.
Just for quick reference. So it's kind of like wanting to understand it. And not all the AI, mean, is going to be able to figure that out. And the other thing about AI, isn't it just draining bodies of knowledge? It's draining, whether it's the famous newspapers or whatever. They're trying to get back at them. You're inputting all these things that have been already recorded somewhere. So that's going to be interesting.
Wow, this has been fabulous. Fascinating and fabulous, Susan. But before we go into the final four, I want to ask you, is there anything we didn't ask you or didn't talk about that you would like us to talk about before we go into the final four? Any, I know you mentioned this new book coming out very soon, and but anything you want to talk about that we didn't talk about before we go into the final four?
Well, the book I'm thinking of writing, uh, I've been to so many trade shows, as has Kevin, and sometimes they're pretty wild and wacky, and sometimes more so for a woman. And so I started thinking about that, and I remembered a book that Steve Martin, the comedian, wrote, and I think it was a little movie called Shop Girl. And I decided to call my book Expo Girl.
Ah, love
And
it.
I'm gonna already do a little cover thing, but I've outlined 12 expos that I went to, and some crazy, wild things happened. I mean, like the case where my partner abandoned me, and then the guy across the aisle started coming on to me and all this stuff at the Jacob Javits Center in New York City. Uh, that would occur. That'll be a funny story. Um, and several others. One in Miami Beach, where a coworker of mine from Italy. Some of my jobs, we had a plant in France and Italy, the Netherlands. So sometimes, like if I would go to Procter and Gamble in Cincinnati, I'd also go to Procter and Gamble in Germany because I knew the account. But this woman flies to this trade show, and she's not showing up in the evenings for dinner. Turned out she was on a plane that had a lot of delays. She met this guy. Anyway, it's a funny story. She's got this Italian accent. And then she calls me like a year later, and I'm like, Christina, where are you? She says, well, I'm up at 3M. I married a 3M-er. Right. But that's just one of the things that happened at that trade show. And the,
You have a lot of stories to tell. I can see.
yeah.
I see 3 or 4
So
books coming.
yes, yes, I'm
Nice, nice.
dedicated part of my beginning of this book to a high school classmate, Tom, who was the class president. And through all the years, he would keep saying, Susie, when are you going to have that book? And I ended up right after he died. So I have a picture with he and I. It's kind of funny. We were most likely to succeed, but I was not number one or number two. I think it was my nerd reputation as a debater, a high school debater, that gave me that. But so I put his picture and mine in there and sort of dedicated it to him. Um,
Love it.
yeah.
Love
And
it. Nice, nice.
just a final thing about growing up, maybe this was uh, in a little town on the top of Lake Michigan, between Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. I was born in Iowa, as were my parents, who both got unusually college degrees in Iowa. And my dad had a forestry degree, forestry engineering. So I always say we had to find the forest. So I went to school in Wisconsin, which was closer than Lower Michigan. I was too intimidated by the idea of a huge college, so I went to one of about 5,000. But then going off to Chicago in a summer in New York City, where I got a grant to study there at the United Nations uh, from a
Nice.
college kind of debate thing, that professor. So, going from that small town with parents who supported me on everything was a wonderful thing to look back on.
Wow. See, that's a book. That's a biography right there. That's an autobiography. I'm looking forward to the next few books you have coming, Susan. Let's go.
Yeah.
No pressure. No pressure. So this is the part of the show where we leverage our high tech skills here. The final four. So with that, let me ask you the first final four question. What's one thing most people don't know about you that you wish they did?
I don't know. My son, that's a good guy. I get to say this. My wonderful son said, Mom is curious about everything. That's why I do adapt to a lot of things, and I liked many things. That's why I liked my career. If I could now do transdermal medicine and then do this or that. So I think, yeah, people don't know that range. I was in a little group one time, and they had something that people don't know about me. And I said I was at the United Nations for a summer, and nobody guessed that because I don't go around saying it. Uh, so, you know, there's a lot of interesting things we can all do that people do not know.
Well, I'm
Interesting.
sitting
Love
here
it.
floored because I didn't know that you were at the United Nations. You've never shared that story with me, and I've been knowing her for 10 years plus. I lived in her house for 3 years, and I still didn't know that United Nations. So after this podcast, we're going to talk about the United Nations.
Lots to catch up on.
There
Yeah.
are some things in your accomplishments through the years that you don't want people to think you're bragging about. I like
Yeah.
siblings. I don't even know whether they know I have a master's because uh, it was like one time, like in a little back and forth. Oh, you and your travels and your this and that.
Yeah.
I didn't, sometimes I would bring a gift from a travel, which I'm sure you do. So it's like, no, you're not going to be out
Yeah.
bragging all the time. Unless you need it
Sure.
for the
Makes
job,
sense.
unless you need it for the client.
Well, here's a second final four question, Susan. Alive or dead, who would you want to have dinner with and why?
Oh my goodness. Well, that original editor, I have looked for her through the years.
Hmm.
I mean, she was a rare woman. This downtown Chicago, she lived in a building there. Uh, I really don't know much about her personal life, but I was so impressed. And actually, that reminds me, I was drunk about 3 times in my life in what should have been a job. And through the years, have rarely been drinking. But the printers in that downtown Chicago thing would bring us out at Christmas. And I think they own one of those old like speakeasies where you're downstairs. So they're all drinking, we're eating snacks. Then, that editor brings me with we go to the Gaslight Club in downtown Chicago, and we're drinking in this first room. Then we go to the next room. They handed out little drumsticks to drum with, and now I'm drunk. And I go in the ladies' room, and I'm just standing in that metal stall, thinking, "Pull yourself together." And after a while, she came in, and she's like, "Susan," and all I did was I went clang against the side of the wall. Okay, she left. I mean, one reason I love her. She left and she just, they were out there having more drinks, and I pulled myself together, and went back. Uh, just a wonderful person. You'd like to be that way with people that work for you or whatever. Understand it was a moment. And actually,
Yeah.
one other was at the Franklin Mint in Philadelphia area. And I met these 2 men, they were already drinking. I had to avoid lunches later. I couldn't do it. Even if I tried not to drink much, they're always setting you up. And so they were at a golf club drinking, then we went to lunch, drinking, and now I feel like I had too much. But we went to the Franklin Mint and they gave us a big tour. And I thought, I'm sober. And I was able to do the meeting. But I learned from
Nice.
those early experiences, don't. And actually, when guys from Toronto they would want to drink their lunch. And they were like, "Do you
Mm.
have an appointment after lunch?" And I'm like, "Well, I do." And they're like, "Bring her another one."
Yeah.
Or, yeah, but in DC like that. So it's like, never be there at 9 in the morning. Do not go to lunch with them.
That's funny. That's funny. The next Final Four question. What's the best compliment that you've ever received?
Well, on my first sales job, among the men and the 35 commodity people, I had this boss. I worked in Philadelphia for a while for him, even though headquarters was Wisconsin. And he was wonderful. In fact, the office had 2 of the commodity people and me. But when I got there, they took the 2 offices and gave me the secretary's desk. So I asked him, can I work out of my home downtown Philly? And I had customers, and he was fine. But I went on a trip with him. He was a man of few words, contrary to I am right now. Uh, at the end of the visit, we went to these customers, and I bring him to the airport. He said, "Very nice job, Susan." Just like 3 words. And I
Wow.
knew him, and it meant so much to me that
Yeah.
that he just gave me the thumbs up.
Well, that was
Wow.
it for the final four questions, Susan. What is something that never fails to make you laugh? tears out your eyes, holding your side. What is that comedic moment that just gets you every time?
Well, first of all, you have to know I love comedians of all kinds. Like I have uh, 5 comedy channels on my car. Although I have news, comedy, music, Conan O'Brien, and I can, so, and it doesn't matter to me if it's clean or dirty. If it's funny, if it's true,
Funny's funny, right?
is funny. But I can't think of a quick answer to that. Although when you do something, well, it's fun to laugh at yourself when you do certain things. Like I'm kind of klutzy at this point. And if you drop your guy's entire bottle of vodka or something, might be funny to you that you messed up. I'm like, yeah, look what I did over there. But yes, so you can be funny yourself.
That is so cool because Dre, before when Susan was getting ready for this podcast, she had mentioned that something about Kevin Hart. So she just said that right minutes before. She was talking to Terry about Kevin Hart or something, and I was like, I know she loves comedy, I know she loves comedians, but Susan, I want to thank you for being on my podcast. Like I said, it's a special honor. This is the first time I guess my brothers who's on here, but this is the first time I had family on here, a mother figure, and I'm just so
Yeah.
proud and honored to have you on here, and I can't wait for this to drop. So thank you very much for being on the Dre and Smiley Inner Circle
Well, thank you
podcast.
so much. And so my book on Amazon, 14 dinners and a lunch. You can just put in Susan Stansbury 14 dinners, and the book comes up. So hopefully, I'm going to reissue it because I really haven't promoted it. And I did have a nice interview with the Milwaukee Journal. Gave me a nice review and a few other things. But I'm going to start actually promoting it rather than just doing the writing. Like some artists only do the painting and then they don't promote it.
So we're going to promote it here on the Dre and Smiley Inner Circle.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.